Okay, so get ready because we are diving into some pretty deep waters today.
Yeah, deep
You
waters.
guys send in some excerpts from two articles, Leadership,
Yeah,
Who Needs It,
yeah.
and
I
Is
like
Leadership a Myth?
those are some provocative
They
titles.
are, and you're obviously ready to, really kind of shake things up and rethink some stuff, so
Really?
let's do it.
Yeah.
So I gotta say, just reading through these articles don't mess around.
No, they don't. They're straight to the point.
Yeah, they're very dense, very meaty, but super interesting.
They really make you think about things we just take for granted, especially in places like schools. Like, do we even need leaders the way we traditionally think about them? It's a great question.
It's a question I've honestly never really considered before, but to get us started, the first article uses this case study, this leading teacher. They call him LT's Tab 4,
Okay.
and they're describing this guy. He's handling timetables, staffing, basically all the stuff that has to happen to keep a school running.
Right. The nuts and bolts.
All the behind-the-scenes stuff. Yeah, exactly, the nuts and bolts. So, is LT Check 4 a leader in the situation, or is he more of a manager?
That is the million-dollar question. And what's so clever about the article is it points out how much that distinction, that leader versus manager thing, can really trip us up.
Yeah.
Like, on the one hand, this LT Check 4, he's great at organizing resources, making sure things run smoothly. And that seems very management, right? But then
Yeah.
you realize he's also thinking strategically out those systems, like how to actually improve things, which sounds a lot like leadership, wouldn't you say?
It does. Yeah, it seems like a really blurry line.
It's super blurry.
But there's got to be some difference between leading and managing, right?
I think we want there to be. We like our neat categories, but maybe, and this is what one of the authors suggests, maybe trying to separate them is actually part of the problem. Like, instead of getting hung up on labels, we should just look at the impact. So someone like LT Check 4, highly effective manager, maybe we call them a high-profile manager.
So instead of leadership being this thing in and of itself, it's more like a really good manager, like knocking it out of the park.
Yeah, kind of.
Kind of anticlimactic in a way, isn't it? Like, we build up leadership to be this big, important thing.
I know, right? We like our heroes. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
By letting go of that rigid categorization, we can actually start to see influence in a whole new light.
Because really, when you get down to it, leadership is about influence, right?
Exactly.
Getting people on board with a vision, making change happen.
Exactly. But here's the thing. You don't need leader printed on your business card to have influence. And this is where that whole messy web of concepts comes into play. Power, authority, even, manipulation.
Okay, yeah, let's try to untangle that web a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it's like leadership is the popular kid in school, and then you've got power and influence over here, kind of like the less cool classmates.
That's a great analogy. And the articles highlight how we rarely question the importance of leadership with the same intensity that we do, say, power dynamics. For instance, when we think of leadership, we almost always assume followers, right? But what if instead we imagine systems where influence was more, distributed? Everyone contributes. Everyone has a voice, regardless of their title or position.
It kind of makes you wonder if those other ways of contributing, if they're already happening all around us, just overshadowed by this focus on the leader at the top.
Exactly. And that leads us to another crucial point that both of these articles bring up: the myth of the superhero leader.
Right, this idea that leaders are these exceptional beings, that you can just swoop in and single-handedly transform entire organizations, which, okay, makes for a good story,
But
but
is it realistic?
right, is it actually helpful?
One author argues that this whole superhero narrative can actually discourage people from stepping up because they look at that and think, well, I'm not superhuman. I can't do that. They don't see themselves fitting the mold.
Yeah, it sets the bar impossibly high.
Exactly.
And speaking of high bars, what about this designer leadership concept that keeps popping up? It's like we're trying to create standardized blueprints for how leaders should act, which, I don't know, feels very science fiction-y to me.
It does, doesn't it? This idea that we can just manufacture the ideal leader.
Yeah, like clone them in a lab.
Right. But can we really define leadership with a formula?
No.
And more importantly, should we?
Yeah, what happens to individuality, to creativity, if everyone's following the same leadership playbook?
Exactly. It seems like we lose something really essential in that process, that spark.
Right, because influence shouldn't be mass-produced. It should be organic. It should come from a genuine place.
Exactly. And losing sight of that natural flow of influence, could be way more damaging than we realize.
So we've got the leadership management divide, the superhero myth, and now this cookie-cutter approach to leadership. There seems to be a theme emerging here.
Definitely. Both of these articles, they're urging us to rethink leadership from the ground up, to abandon our old assumptions and embrace a more realistic and potentially more collaborative understanding of how influence really works.
So, I mean, are we really saying that the best kind of leadership is sometimes no leadership at all?
In a way, yeah.
It feels kind of weird to think about it like that.
It does go against everything we've been taught.
But like when you think about those really self-directed teams, or even just someone who's incredibly passionate about a project, sometimes that can be way more powerful than having a designated leader, right?
Absolutely. And these articles, they really challenge us to open up our definition of where influence comes from. Because it's not always the person with the fancy title, right?
Right. It could be like the teacher with years of experience, or
Exactly.
even a student with a fresh perspective.
Or even, the task itself.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Like sometimes the work just has a way of pulling people in a certain direction.
So it's more about understanding that whole network of relationships and expertise within an organization instead of just focusing on whoever's at the very top.
That's exactly it. One of the authors even uses this phrase influence as the primary unit of analysis.
Okay, so say that again. I want to make sure I got that.
Sure. Instead of asking, how do leaders lead? We should be asking, who's actually doing the influencing, how often, and in what situations?
So it's not about leadership as this abstract quality. It's about tracking the actual moments of influence, wherever they happen.
You got it.
Okay, starting to see where this is going. It's like those subtle, often invisible ways we influence each other every single day, even if we don't realize it's happening.
Precisely. Imagine if we could somehow map those micro moments of influence, those tiny shifts in thinking or behavior that happen constantly, especially somewhere like a school. We might uncover some really fascinating stuff about how knowledge is actually shared and created.
That's super interesting, but like, how do you even begin to capture those fleeting interactions? You can't follow everyone around with a notebook all day.
It's definitely a challenge. And you're right, traditional methods like surveys or interviews, they rely on people's memories, which, let's be honest, can be a little fuzzy.
Yeah, we're all human, right?
Exactly. So we might need to get a little more creative, maybe borrow some approaches from linguistic research where they really focus on observation, on those subtle cues in conversation and action.
So we need to become influence detectives, carefully observing how ideas take root and decisions are made, even in the most ordinary situations.
I love that. Influence detectives. That's perfect.
Ah, I'll take it.
Because it really is about spotting those, oh, what's the word? Those epistemic objects.
Okay.
Basically, those small units of influence that, like ripples in a pond, can have a surprisingly big impact.
Okay, so not to get too literal, but give me an example.
Yeah.
What would an epistemic object look like in, say, a school setting?
Sure. Imagine a teacher's casually mentioning a new teaching technique to a colleague in the hallway. Seems like a small thing, right?
Yeah, just a regular conversation.
Exactly. But that little interaction, that could be enough to spark an idea that spreads throughout the entire department, maybe even the whole school. That's an epistemic object in action.
So it's those little things, the stuff that often flies under the radar, that can actually have a huge ripple effect.
Precisely. And this kind of research, it's still pretty new, but it has the potential to completely change how we understand influence and how it relates to, that thing we call leadership.
This is starting to feel like a pretty major shift in thinking. So, like, if we accept that this whole traditional idea of leadership might be a myth, what does that mean for how we actually run organizations?
That is the million-dollar question. If we let go of the superhero leader model, what happens next? Do we just ditch hierarchy altogether?
Right. Do we all become a bunch of independent teams, each doing our own thing?
Or is there some kind of middle ground? A way to balance individual initiative with some sort of coordinated effort?
This is like blowing my mind a little bit, not gonna lie. Are we saying that we need a whole new vocabulary to describe how influence works?
Maybe. Maybe we retire the word leadership altogether.
Whoa, that's a big step.
I know, right?
But like, what would we use instead?
Well, one author throws out a few ideas, like instead of leadership, we talk about influence processes
Okay, I like that. Influence processes.
or co-workership to really emphasize that sense of collaboration.
Yeah, that's it.
Another idea that I find really intriguing is deliberate leadership.
Okay, break that one down for me. What is deliberate leadership?
So instead of just automatically deferring to whoever has the leader title, we consciously decide as a group when and how we want to leverage leadership.
So it's less about a default setting and more of a conscious choice. Like, okay, for this particular situation, what kind of influence do we need? That's such a different way of approaching authority. It's like flipping the script.
Right. And it makes you think about how we train people for these roles that we traditionally associate with leadership.
Right.
If we're moving away from the superhero model, what skills should we be prioritizing?
Yeah, it's not about, like, being the loudest voice in the room or having all the answers.
Exactly.
It seems like adaptability would be huge and, like you said, collaboration.
Being comfortable with a more fluid approach to influence.
Okay, so we're rethinking how we define leadership, how we measure influence, even the language we use to talk about it.
It's a whole new world.
It really is. These articles are pushing us towards a much more fluid, much more dynamic understanding of how people work together.
Because the old models, they just don't seem to fit anymore, do they?
Not really. So much to think about, so much to process.
It's a lot to take in, for sure. But this whole new wave of critical leadership research, it's definitely shaking things up. And I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's definitely giving us a lot to chew on. It's like we're being asked to, like, totally rethink how we think about leadership.
Yeah, to come up with a whole new approach.
One that's less about hierarchy and control and more about, I don't know, tapping into the collective intelligence of the people around us.
That's a great way to put it. And both of these articles, they're really pushing for that, for a more nuanced, more contextual way of understanding influence.
Yeah.
One that recognizes just how complex human interactions really are.
Because they are, if we're being honest.
Absolutely. And they're highlighting all those kind of like invisible forces that are always at play, shaping how we work together, even when we don't realize it.
So, okay, if we're not all destined to become these, like, superhero leaders, how can we, just as individuals navigating these really complex systems, how can we still have a positive impact?
That's such an important question.
Yeah, like, what does this all actually mean for me on a practical level?
I think it starts with becoming more aware of our own influence, even in the smallest moments, because we all contribute to the culture of our workplaces, to the direction our teams are moving in,
Right.
whether we realize it or not.
So it's less about, like, striving to be a leader
Yeah.
and more about understanding how our words and actions, even the things we don't say, are already influencing the people around us.
Exactly. And that influence, it can be positive or negative, right? It's about being mindful, being intentional.
So, like, really tuning in to how we're showing up in those everyday interactions.
Yes. Because leadership, or I guess influence, it's not something we do to other people, it's something we create with them.
Okay, I like that. That's a really cool way to think about it.
Because it means that we all have the potential to make a difference no matter what our job title is or where we fall in the hierarchy.
It's very empowering when you think about it like that.
It really is. And that's maybe the most profound takeaway from all of this. If we really want to understand leadership, we need to stop looking for it in the usual places, you know?
Right, not just the people with manager in their titles.
Exactly. We have to start paying attention to those hidden currents of influence, the ones that are shaping our world in often the most unexpected ways.
It's like we're all part of this, like, this intricate dance, this dance of influence,
I love that analogy.
even if we're not always aware of all of the steps.
And the more aware we become of our own steps, the more skillfully we can navigate that dance.
Yeah, no more stepping on each other's toes.
Exactly. And that's how we create a more harmonious and more productive environment for everyone.
This has been a really, really cool deep dive.
It's been fun.
It really has. Like, my brain is officially fried in the best way possible.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to go back and listen to this one again when I have some more time to really sit with it.
It's a lot to process.
It is, but it's good stuff. So for everyone listening, we've challenged the myths, we've explored some new possibilities, and hopefully given you some new ideas to think about. But the real work starts now, right? Like, take some time to reflect on your own experiences. How are you influencing the people around you? Where are you seeing these epistemic objects pop up in your own life? And how can you become a more conscious, more intentional agent of influence in your own little corner of the world? Until next time, keep those questions coming, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.